You may be watching this video because you're going to your very first Warhammer tournament, or perhaps you've been to many tournaments and you're looking to enhance your experience. Either way, I think this video is going to have a lot of great information for anybody that's planning on going to an in-person Warhammer tournament. I think the tips here are going to help you either improve your experience or even help you win more games. So let's take a look at my top 5 tips for going to a tournament. The number one tip that I can offer, and I think this is the most important one, is to plan out your deployment before you go to the tournament. So most tournaments are going to tell you what the missions are in the pack for the tournament. So this means that you'll either know exactly which game you're playing which mission, or perhaps that there's a total number of missions, but any of them could be played during the course of the tournament. It's going to be a lot of work to plan out your deployment. You can do it on paper, you can do it on a computer program, whatever, but it's going to be completely worth it. Think about it. You're just going to have met some player. You have to play them. They're telling you all of the rules of their army. And at the same time, maybe you just played a game, maybe you're tired, whatever it is. And now you have to think about your deployment. So if you have a plan, it's just going to take pressure off of your brain. It's going to be one less thing that you have to formulate, and it will make it an easier experience for you. You do have to be prepared to make adjustments. You can't just stick to a plan, because if your opponent deploys a certain way, if they're playing a certain army, if they're going to alpha strike you, then yeah, you might have to react and set up screens or whatever it is. But at the end of the day, if you're not sure and you're just really kind of freaking out, you're thinking, I got to get my models on the table, then stick to your deployment strategy. Just stick to whatever plan you had. Don't change it if you're not sure. And this is going to ensure that at the very least, all of your models are going to be within the buff ranges that they need to be in. If they need to be wholly within 12, that's part of your plan. You're going to guarantee that. At the very least, you're going to be in position to score a turn one, secondary objective, depending on which game you're playing. Tip number 2 is to use any sort of planning item, tokens, reminders, etc. to take some pressure off of your brain. So one thing I learned playing in my first GT is that the use of tokens is very common and it doesn't have to be complicated. So people were just using things like dry erase tokens that they bought from Magic the Gathering, or maybe pieces of paper, wood circles from a craft store with text written on them, or paper just like taped to the circle. Whatever they were doing, they were just tracking all of their buffs, their debuffs, anything at all that their units were applying onto the field. So this is just another method to take the burden off of your mind so that you can focus on your strategy or thinking the next turn ahead of where you're going to need to move to, rather than trying to hold in your head all of these different pieces of information and then summon them at the exact moment that you need them. For instance, you're being shot at and you have a defensive buff and you have to remember that. Whereas somebody says they're shooting at you, you can look at the table and guess what? The piece of paper tells you that you have a -1 to hit right now, or something along those lines. It has the added benefit of communicating with your opponent for you. So there's no feel bad or gotcha moments. They just see what you have and they know what to expect, or they see that you have an ability present and they ask you, hey, what does that ability do again? I think it's really going to reduce the moments in a game where people feel bad about something that happened, because everything's been communicated properly. And again, it's one less thing for you to think about, which is properly informing your opponent about what kind of things your army can do. I recently made my own tokens by printing out a sheet of circles that I found online. I used Canva to edit those circles and put a bunch of text in them, and then I printed them out. I cut them out, I glued them onto some old warscroll cards from 3rd edition Age of Sigmar, and then I cut those circles out and I glued another layer of Mod Podge on top of the paper to seal the whole thing in, so they're going to be a little bit more durable. And now I have a full army set of custom tokens for Cities of Sigmar that I didn't have prior to this, and it's going to make my job playing the army a lot easier. Tip number 3 is to clarify intent with your opponent. And this is something that was recommended to me in a comment from my video about preparing for a tournament. Someone said you really need to just always declare your intent and things will work out smoother for you. It was really helpful advice. So clarifying your intent with your opponent is crucial to avoid any sort of feel bad moments. You tell your opponent that your intent is to be within a certain range of a buff or a battle tactic or whatever, secondary mission that you're trying to score, or maybe that you are within a certain range of a charge and that's what you're hoping to do, is make a 6-inch charge onto a certain target. This gives your opponent a chance to measure these things or ask questions about it or reveal something that will not work when you try to do that. The flip side of this is that you don't say anything and then your opponent can debate the ranges later, and rightfully so. You might not actually be in range and you'll miss out on a crucial part of your turn, and that's going to feel really bad. This actually happened to me during a specific practice game where I thought I was going to be in range for a battle tactic. I didn't say anything, and then when we checked at the end of the turn, my opponent was like, "Oh, you're not actually in range." And I'm like, "Oh, when I set up my deployment, I thought I was going to be. I guess I mismeasured, blah, blah, blah." And my opponent was super nice and said, "Look, that's what your intent was, and it's a practice game, so we're just gonna give you the battle tactic so we can keep playing, because it's more fun if it's a tight game." But in a tournament, that would not fly at all. You would just lose those points, and it would be a really tough way to start the game. So it's super important that you share exactly what you're hoping will happen or what you're gonna do, so that your opponent can be in front of it. And the same thing can happen with your opponent. You should be asking them what their intent is. So for example, you can ask your opponent, "What are you hoping to do with this move?" Or just ask, "What is your intent here?" And this will allow for a chance for a discussion to happen, and they may choose not to share with you what they want to do, and that's fine. You don't need to know like their whole plan. You just need to know if they think that they're going to be making a 7-inch charge and they haven't told you that, and then they go to make it. You are within your right to measure that, and if it's not what they thought it was and you guys didn't talk about it, again, it's those moments that feel bad for both players where things didn't quite work out the way that they thought it was going to. Tip number 4 is to plan out all of your meals and drinks. So based on the tournament schedule, you're going to know exactly when the breaks are and where, or when your food is going to come from. Like, you need to know those details. So when I played at the two-day GT, I bought a large lumberjack sandwich from my local grocery store, and then I portioned it across those 2 days. It was a really cost-effective way for me to eat a lot of sandwich over a couple of days. I also plan to go get a McDonald's value meal between the matches 2 and 3 on the kind of the dinner break, and that worked out pretty well for me as well. But if games go long or the breaks are shorter or whatever, you need to actually think about, am I going to go hungry? And you are going to be hungry. You're playing Warhammer all day. You're expending a lot of mental energy and physical energy just standing and moving around a table. You're going to be very hungry. You're going to want some food. So you have to think about that. You also want to bring as much water as is reasonable that you can carry, because you're going to go through more than 1 bottle a day. I brought a 1-liter hydro flask, so I had nice cold water, but I went through it before each day was over, and so then I had no water, and I could have tap water because I'm very lucky to live in a part of the world where tap water is totally safe to drink, but I do wish that I had brought some extra water, or perhaps a cooler with some extra drinks, and just left it in my car or something. That would have made things really easy for me. For my next tournament, I'm probably gonna plan to not even leave the store at all. I think that's a really cool way to plan it out, so that you just have zero stresses about having to get back and go anywhere. And you can always do that if people are going for lunch or something and you want to be social, that's great. But I just think having a plan otherwise with snacks and whatever else you're going to bring is just the best way to go. And then again, the idea with this tournament prep is you're lifting things out of your brain, and then they're already done. You never have to worry about them. And what that allows you to do is really just save all of that mental, every little mental space and power counts. And you want to save that for the game so you can have fun and you can do well. If you plan out to bring all of your meals or something, and you're going to stay at the venue and whatever, you decide to do, that is really going to help with my final piece of advice. My 5th tip for going to tournaments is to talk to people, to be social, and to grow your Warhammer bubble. So you may have no trouble with this goal at all. Maybe you are very social, or maybe you already know a lot of the Warhammer players in your area. But this is going to be really important for people going to their first ever tournament, or maybe some people that are just more introverted or shy. This is absolutely crucial, because talking to people is going to make your tournament experience better. So what am I talking about here? It's going to make the games go faster. It's going to make the time between games go faster. You're also going to learn more about the game and about other armies, because you'll be talking to all of these different people, and you'll hear all about their experiences, their mistakes, or things that worked well for them in games, or just things that went well for their army. And it's a really good chance to learn, especially if you're new. if you happen to get drawn in a match against somebody that you know, then you're going to have a way better time. It's instantly going to be a relief for you. It's one less unknown on your mind of what's this person going to be like? Are they going to be nice? Is it going to be a smooth game, etc.? Because you already know them. It takes all of the pressure off. And finally, making friends at tournaments is going to open up opportunities to have casual games in the future. So maybe you're going to find somebody that you can play with more regularly, or perhaps you want to be a competitive player and you're going to find other competitive players. And those are going to be possible training partners for you in the future, where you can train for tournaments together and test lists and theory craft together. You might even get invited to a Discord community where your friendships and your skill level, etc., can all continue to grow, and you can stay connected and find games with other people. You might be thinking at this point, hey, Mysidia, that all sounds great, but I'm really not the best at talking with people that I don't know very well. And that's totally fair. It is very tough to talk to people that you don't know. I struggle with that too. That is why I want to share some secrets that I use that help me talk to people that I don't know in every part of my life. So people are inherently focused on their own lives. That's totally reasonable. That's how all humans operate. We are the main characters of our own lives, our stories, whatever. So when you are at a hobby event like a Warhammer tournament, you have already a huge in on somebody's life, and you have the perfect topic to dive into. That is the fact that they enjoy Warhammer. So you can ask people about their armies. You can ask them about their army choice, their list composition, hobbying aspects like painting or custom builds, anything that you see. Try to compliment something about their army, anything at all. Just show interest and appreciation for the effort and time that they've put into preparing for this tournament, and then they can show their army off or whatever. Now, here's the most important part of this. If you're stuck and you're like, I don't know what to say, I've asked about their army and they said like 2 words, just simply seek to understand what they are saying. Keep that goal in your mind. You seek to understand. So that means if you're talking about the paint job, ask about what paints they used. You can talk about painting techniques, or even just ask like, when do you find time to paint? Because for me, it's, when I get home, I try to do 30 minutes a day or whatever it is. If somebody shares their army list with you, then ask about it. Ask if they have any spicy model choices or little tech pieces, or what like a cool play is, or maybe what armies they're hoping to run into, or armies that they're hoping to avoid. If it's round 2 onward, you can also just ask about their last game or how the tournament is going in general. You can offer them good luck in their next round, and you can check in with them after the round and say, hey, how did your game go? And they say, oh, I won. Oh, I lost. Great. Oh, what happened? What was the big turning point? What did you do? And you can just ask questions about it. People will appreciate this, and they'll feel valued and appreciated that someone actually is checking in with them, and it validates them coming to the event. It validates them the whole experience of just playing a game, that they get to share that with somebody. Now, there are 3 big things that you want to avoid when you're doing this. The first is when you seek to understand, you can't just interview somebody. You can't just be asking questions over and over. And if they're not really giving you a lot of answers, don't just keep asking questions. That's just going to be kind of an annoying thing that you're doing. You need to add value. You need to respond to them. Or at least one thing that's really helpful is you can repeat what they're saying back to them. So if somebody says that they had, really bad luck in one part of the game, you can say like, oh, that sucks that you had bad luck, on your attack rolls. Like, how do you think it would have gone there if you had gotten the rolls that you needed? And then all of a sudden that's better than just asking the next question. But don't rapid fire ask questions. You're going to exhaust other people if you do that. The second thing is that you want to keep the overall conversation positive. And it's easy to complain about things like your luck or the price of models or GW's treatment of your army. And you're going to hear other people complaining at the tournament as well. And it's honestly an easy conversation to get into. Everybody can get together on that and have a good time. And that is okay. But at the end of the day, negativity breeds more negativity. And that's the lasting thing that you might have as an experience in a negative conversation is just that it was negative. So try to have positive conversations as well. Don't stick to just the negative things. And finally, when you're talking to people and asking questions and seeking to understand their background, you will likely have a lot of ideas pop into your head. You might think about something that happened to you that relates to something that they said, and you're going to be like waiting to fire that off. But before you rattle off your own story, make sure you acknowledge what they said. Again, you can even just repeat what they said back to them in an accepting way. or whatever it is, just to validate that person and not just waiting to fire your own thing out there. You might also think about, oh, I want to give advice to this player, especially if you're an experienced player. And I personally love getting advice from people. Like, that's one of the things I really crave. So I have no problem if somebody comes in and just tells me, you know, what they think I should have done differently. Generally, when people are looking to vent or sharing their experiences or complaining, they're not actually looking for advice. They just want to be heard and validated and not told what to do differently or to be positive or to have a different outlook. There are times for those conversations, especially if somebody asks you for advice, and you can also say, may I offer you some advice? And they might say, yeah, that would be great. Thank you. But honestly, sometimes just listening is going to go a lot farther with somebody than jumping in with what they should have done differently or, you know, what mistake they made. So this ended up being the biggest part of the video, and it's something that I've thought really deeply about as a high school teacher, and it's something that I run into a lot with all the extracurriculars that I run at the school. There's lots of social dynamic stuff and conflicts that often have to be talked out, and it's something that I work with a lot with students. And as a teacher, personally, one of the hardest skills I've ever had to learn and practice has been how to listen to a student without giving any advice, because these are teenagers that don't know a lot of stuff that we adults do know. And when they come to us, a lot of times they just want to be heard. And when I do that, it's made massive changes to my relationships with my students, even with my family members, my colleagues, my friends. So I think it's a lesson that applies to everybody, to humans in general, that a lot of people just want to be heard, validated. They don't necessarily need you to cue in with whatever it is you want to tell them how to change or, you know, how to improve. So I hope this advice helps you all in your lives. And if I got way out of, you know, I guess off the mark here in terms of what this video was for, I apologize, but it's something that I really think about. And I hope at least a few people comment and say, hey, that's cool. Thanks for that tip. I'm going to try that. I do have one final bonus tip for going into tournaments, and that is to set a goal for yourself. Write it down somewhere and actually look at it. Look at it before you play each day on the tournament, and then maybe even look at it between each game. This is going to help you stay focused on the goal and remember it, because setting it is good, but if you don't ever look at it, you're going to forget about it. You won't be able to make any action happen on that goal. So it's going to help you manage your expectations as well and not get caught up in how a game is going. This also lets you set just reasonable goals if you actually think about what is your goal, and you won't get lost in the weeds if you're losing a bunch. For example, it doesn't have to be a win total. It could just be, I want to have close games, or I want to score X amount of points or battle tactics. Maybe it's, I want to have a conversation with somebody that I've never met before, or I want to never forget one of my army rules for the whole tournament. That's what I want to do. That's my goal. Either way, if you set a goal and you look at it, you are so much more likely to achieve it. That's it for this video, but I'd love to hear other people's advice for going into tournaments. So please share those stories in the comments, and I'm going to catch and respond to as many of those as I can.